So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move straight on now to our panel discussion, which I think is going to be a really, really interesting conversation. We've got a lot of experienced people who are going to be joining us and sharing their opinions. The panel itself is going to explore the journey that data leaders go on to build their long-term data strategy. As before, there will be an audience Q&A towards the end of the session. So do submit your questions as you think of them. You don't need to wait till the end. Submit them during the panel, and we'll go through as many as we can at the end. We're very pleased to have Denodo supporting this discussion to make it possible. So thank you to Paul, who's going to be on the panel, and everyone else at Denodo as well. And the session is going to be moderated by John Minkoff, who is CDO of the Enforcement Bureau at the FCC. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to John and let him kick things off for the panel. I think John might just be connecting now, so I'll give him a minute to get his webcam on there and get it all ready to go. We are just slowly connecting the panelists, so just bear with us while we make sure we get everyone dialed in. I think it looks like we have John. John, if you can hear me, I think on go the headphones, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that should be the signal that we should hopefully have connection with John momentarily. Hi, John. Give us a wave if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, John. That's great. So I was just saying I'll hand over to you, John, so that you can kick things off with the panel, and I'll hand over to you.
Great. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Minkoff. I am the Chief Data Officer of the Enforcement Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. And I'm delighted to be here, serve as moderator over today's panel, which is going to be talking about developing a long-term data strategy. And I've been in my role for 10 years, and I think that it's very easy to focus day to day on the immediate problems that are facing a CDO. But the real strategy is looking at the long term, because it's only through developing a long-term strategy that you can stabilize your systems and really get that maturity that everybody is after. And I know that the panelists today have a lot to add to this discussion. And so with that, I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, just briefly give their name, their position, the agency or company that they work for, and then maybe a couple of sentences about their experience in their current position. So with that, why don't we start off with Eric?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Eric Ewing. I'm the Director of Data and Analytics for the GSA Centers of Excellence. What we do is we partner with other agencies to bring IT modernization initiatives. We bring IT modernization initiatives across data and analytics, of course, AI, cloud and infrastructure, as well as customer experience and contact centers. In my experience with GSA, we've been working with HUD, DoD, Department of Labor, OPM, USDA, among many others, to help modernize their IT in partnership with both that agency and with industry, and really bringing best practices and ensuring that that agency is moving down the path to better serve their customers.
Great, thank you, Eric. Paul?
Hi, everybody. My name's Paul Moxon. I am the VP of Data Architectures and Chief Evangelist at Denodo Technologies. Denodo is one of the leading data integration companies. With that glorious title, I actually work a lot with organizations, both in the public and the private sector, both here in the US and overseas, advising on their data and analytics strategies. And when I say public sector, I'm talking about people at the national or the federal level here in the US, in the UK, in Singapore, etc. And at the state level, again, in the US, but also places like Australia, working with state governments there. And I always like to sort of, it's always interesting to compare and contrast the different approaches, or sometimes similar approaches, taken by both public agencies and private sector. So back to you, John.
Great. Welcome, Paul. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. I'm Elizabeth Puchek. I'm the Deputy Chief Data Officer for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where I've been since 2018. I've helped to develop USCIS's first data strategy and formed the first office of this CDO, where we do both data management and data analytics. I've been in the Department of Homeland Security for close to 10 years and have spent most of that time at Customs and Border Protection. I'm a structural engineer by training and a systems engineer by experience, so I'm passionate about analysis, process, and visualizing abstract concepts.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. And then Sandra.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandra Parsons. I am the Director of Data Analysis for the Veterans Affairs Inspector General's Office. I manage a team of government employees as well as contractors, and my team wears quite a few hats. We are responsible for taking VA data and loading it to a data warehouse that the OIG owns. We also do ad hoc reporting. So when an OIG is doing an oversight project, we provide the data either from our data warehouse or from the VA's data warehouse to support an investigation, an audit, or a healthcare project. And then with my contracting team for the last 2 years, we've been working on doing more predictive analytics and modeling. We're on the third year of that program now.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you very much for being part of this panel. I've got 3 questions. And the first question that I have for the panelists is something that I touched on in my opening remarks, and that is, how do you really balance the short-term needs of those quick wins and those immediate problems with the requirement to develop and really execute that long-term data strategy? Elizabeth, you mind kicking us off with your thoughts?
Sure. You need quick wins to develop and execute a long-term data strategy. They really go hand in hand. Quick wins buy you political capital, and political capital enables you to develop and execute that strategy. So the key to that is really listening. To develop a strategy, you obviously need to have a future state vision. Otherwise, what do you need a strategic plan for? So to create that vision, you really have to have a good understanding of what the pain points are so you can fix them. If you already have a network, great, listen to them when they talk. If you don't, it's a great opportunity to build a place for yourself, ask questions, and listen to the answers. When we were developing the first data strategy at USCIS, we must have talked to hundreds of executives and analysts and adjudicators, technologists, both at headquarters and in the field. I often felt like a therapist listening to everyone's data problems. Every once in a while, you'll hear someone say something and you'll think to yourself, oh, I can fix that. I can make that happen. I can make this easier for someone. So when you get back home and you follow up and you follow through, you can really start to build immense political capital that reinforces your strategy. During one of our chats in Texas, our background check unit mentioned that they spend an extraordinary amount of time checking about 600 cases a day against a Department of Justice database, one by one. So we called the chief counsel at the department and also asked some of our own internal stakeholders to pause on renegotiating an agreement. And we were able to pretty quickly implement a batch process to enable bulk case vetting. So this reduced the amount of time that we spent vetting those cases by 90%. So this quick win bought us an extraordinary amount of political capital. the leadership in Texas was excited to develop the strategy with us. They wanted to partner. Their analysts wanted to work with us and be part of the community that we were building. And they continue to be a strong partner as we execute today.
Great. That's a good story. Thank you. Let's go next to Eric.
I think when trying to determine what your data strategy looks like and trying to find what those quick wins are, I feel like there's a symbiotic relationship there. And the key is being comfortable with change. So ultimately, when developing quick win use cases, when sourcing these use cases, when we're determining the technical requirements for those use cases, with many of our partner agencies, not only are we determining what's needed for that specific problem set, but we're also learning a lot about the agency itself in the broader scheme of the direction that the agency is moving. And we constantly are updating our data strategy to reflect what we see as truth on the ground, because ultimately the data strategy is there to drive results. And those results come in the form of those quick wins. And obviously not all wins are very quick, but this is the way that we have to, this is the way that we view it, is while we're learning about the agency, while we're rolling out quick prototypes and quick use cases, we're also learning about the agency. We're also plugging what we learn into the data strategy so that our data strategy always remains relevant, always remains effective. And ultimately, the data strategy itself should be able to feed back into some of the bigger use cases we're trying to develop and ultimately be a guide for success in those use cases. What outcomes are we trying to achieve? Do those outcomes map back to the data strategy? And does that data strategy map back to the overall strategy of the agency and to some of the things that we've seen from OMB, some of the guidance that we've seen? Do all of these things fit together, and are we driving results that meet multiple of our requirements? Because all agencies have more requirements than they can count right now with data, and that is a very positive thing. It drives us in the right direction, and ultimately it creates a need to be able to fulfill multiple of those requirements with each individual use case that we do. So is it helping us better manage our information, our financial information? Is it helping us better provide services to our end users? What are these use cases really doing that helps push the agency further down the maturity, further up the maturity ladder? And how does it help us better achieve our mission?
Great. Thank you. Sandra?
I think I don't have a, I concur with what I've heard before from Elizabeth and from Eric. We, in our organization, one thing that I've learned is that what a senior leader thinks is a priority or a quick win may not be what the people you're actually going to end up working with think are the quick wins. We've been asked to build tools and automate processes that the actual person doing that process didn't want updated or automated in any way. So you do have to walk a fine line.
How do you do that?
You listen a lot, you talk a lot, and I try to find the compromise between what the senior leader wants and what the individual wants. Sometimes there is a need. I mean, the senior leader's asking for this automation for a reason. So I usually end up going back to them to find out what their actual pain point was, because maybe it wasn't exactly what we understood it to be. And a lot of times it is the person doing it that is the pain point. And so we have to navigate that. And, you know, I spend a lot of my time trying to get people to see that I'm here to help them and that what I'm going to do is not going to, I think there's a fear that if I automate something, I'm going to put them out of a job or they'll have less work to do. But if you really get to know them, you build that relationship with them, then you realize that they realize that that you're out to help them, not to hurt them. And they usually start to notice that there are ways that you could help them. They have their own pain points they just have gotten used to, and they don't realize there's an easier way to do things. And then the only other thing I would say is that we do a lot of fraud analysis in our group. And so our quick win might be one small fraud analysis over one risk indicator. But we try to take that fraud indicator and build it into a larger risk model. We try to build tools on those smaller projects we're doing that are long-term projects to allow people to have their own self-service way to do the same thing. So that becomes part of our long-term strategy going forward.
We may follow up with you. We're developing our own fraud detection tool in one of our fraud divisions, and so we're just getting off the ground. Sounds like you have some good lessons learned that I'd like to follow up with you on.
Sure, anytime.
Great. And Paul.
I think we have consensus. I think everybody's agreeing with each other here. I think we all agree that your strategy and your quick wins have to be related. I think it's Elizabeth said, you've got your future state that's somewhere up here, but your quick wins are stepping stones towards that future state. If your quick wins don't follow the trajectory of your strategy, you don't have a strategy. It's just a scattergun of quick win projects. There's no strategy. So I think we're all in agreement. I agree with what everybody else said.
Okay, great. Well, glad there was no conflict on that first question. So let's turn to money. My second question is talking about, we all work in the public sector. We have finite budgets. We have long, drawn-out budget cycles. And so given this environment, how do you develop that long-term strategy? Paul, you want to give us your thoughts?
Sure. First of all, I think everybody has finite budgets. Maybe the DoD with its weapons things have an infinite budget, but the rest of us have finite budgets. Even in the private sector, people work with finite budgets. So in many cases, especially actually in the government sector, where your priorities may change with a new administration, you have to be adaptable. You have to have reuse. Sandra was talking about building that fraud analysis, fraud prediction, fraud detection algorithms, where they're looking at one predictor, but then you build on top of that for other predictors. So it's that reusability. An example, I'm going to go overseas here to the Australian government, who wanted to share information. Actually, they were sharing the information. The Office of Revenue was sharing information with the Department of Taxation and Finance. Let me get the words right. And they were doing lots of file transfers. And they were doing file transfers with all the other agencies as well. And they decided, okay, we're going to build a data fabric. We're going to expose the data to the Department of Tax and Finance through a data fabric. Once they did that, that's immediately reusable. Everybody else could then start saying, oh, I'll connect to your data fabric to get the data as well. And all of a sudden, you're not doing lots of one-off projects. You're doing something that's reusable, repeatable, cumulative as you build. And that way, when you, and I'm sorry to say that certainly at the state level, there are going to be huge budget cuts coming along. New York State, $13 billion budget deficit this year. And in the federal sector, the reckoning with the economic stimulus will come. So, people are going to have to do more with less. And I think they're just going to have to work in a way that I think actually Sandra's example was a great example of how I can reuse what I've already done. Start with a single problem, but then expand it. So thank you for that, Sandra. You've stolen my thunder now. But so it's a bit of a silly term to work smarter, but that's what I think the agencies have to do. Work in somewhere that is adaptable, reusable. You can start with a small project, which is not going to be that multi-million-dollar budget, and then expand on top of that, rather than go along and say, can I have $25 million for my 5-year strategy? But the answer is going to be no.
So Sandra, do you agree with that? Do you think that the best strategy is to look at kind of the bite-sized projects that lead up to that stable long-term strategy, or do you swing for the fences and ask for the big dog?
So if we had swung for the fences and asked for the big dog, we would have gotten nothing. In fact, when we tried to ask for the small amount, we had a hard time at first. So the way we handled that was we did an internal proof of concept. So we found a group of people who were very smart, who like to work with data, and who were willing to use their collateral duty time to work on another project. So these are the brightest minds that I could find to work with from all across the organization, because I wanted to show that as a proof of concept, this can be done if you've got the right people together and you all work together. So once we were able to show that that worked, then it was much easier to ask for the money, but we still only did it a year at a time. One way that we've done that is we worked with the Department of Commerce's National Technical Information Services Group, or NTIS. They have a vehicle that allows you to purchase services through an interagency agreement with the Department of Commerce. And you get to work with industry leaders who are their joint venture partners. You get to choose the partner that you want to work with. And so we started small. We picked one idea and we started with that one idea. We eventually spread it into 3 different areas, but in each area, we still do the same thing, one at a time. The secret there is to pick the right people to work with. So once we're able to find investigators who are willing to work with us, who can help us triage the anomalies we find and come back with meaningful results, and then we can build on that. And as soon as we were able to find something to prove return on investment, it was much easier to ask for the year 2 funds and then now the year 3 funds. But we're still doing it 1 year at a time.
Yeah, I know Ari and his group there have done some really remarkable things by putting together that partnership. So I'm glad to hear that you had a really positive experience working over at Commerce as well.
It saves us a lot of time in the contracting process. On the software side, we're trying to look for a new platform now to expand what we're doing, and we're going to do that through a blanket purchase agreement so that we don't buy a bazillion-dollar platform today. We buy just what we need today, but we have the ability to continue to add to that platform over the next 5 years.
Super smart. So Eric, so you talked about in your kind of portfolio some really big agencies. How are they going about operating, with their budget? Are they getting big dollar amounts? Are they doing things kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about?
I think DOEs, we have somewhat unique experience in this regard because we come in as another federal agency via NIAA to help partner with other agencies, right? So when we do that, we often echo exactly what Sandra just said in terms of starting small. Let's develop some proofs of concept. Let's understand what the ROI looks like, and then let's make our investments and gradually increase those investments over time. And that's what we've seen many of our successful partner agencies do is generate demand for analytics products, both internally and externally. Sometimes that demand already exists to an extreme amount, and obviously that makes life a little bit easier. But some places need to be able to unlock the understanding of what can actually be done with all of this data that's being collected and how can that improve operations on a day-to-day level. So that start small function is something that we take to heart, but we also, our goal is to try to accelerate. So get from start small to scaling as quickly as possible. And that requires some flexibility. It also requires developing exactly the value that analytics bring to an agency. What is known value, and then going out and discovering what that unknown value is. Folks often sit on a lot of data. They understand that there's got to be value to that data, but they don't know exactly what that is. And we as an organization like to dig in and actually answer some of those questions. And that, of course, helps us when we're thinking about the budget cycles. Another thing we do for budget cycles is, as COEs land, we start to discuss, and this is a lesson learned that we ourselves have had, and we've had some from industry as well, is that when we land, we incorporate the budget team or someone from the budget team as early as possible, just to let them know sort of where we're at, what we're doing. Frankly, there's an underlying process by which all agencies have in their budget cycle, but also agencies have a lot of differences in the way that their budget cycles work as well. And so we want to make sure that we're fully ingratiated with that budget team, that budget team knows what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve on, whether it's the CIO or CFO's behalf, and is able to help us from the outset achieve that mission and help us along those like small steps we need to get to that end future state. So incorporating ourselves and working closely together with that budget team is a very helpful piece of the process as well. Just to make sure that we as GSA, we as industry are coming in and doing things and starting out the way that we need to, so that everyone's on the same page. Another thing I'd like to point to is there's a blog on GSA's website that we had written regarding the Red Queen effect. This is essentially, I'll try to shorten the blog here. This is essentially saying that we should be thoughtful about how we set aside our technology budgets. What part of that budget is to just maintain current state? How much of that budget is to modernize? And then how much of that budget is to innovate ultimately? Because a part of our budget, we should be thinking about innovation. We should be thinking about encouraging innovation. So what are ways we can do that? And there are prize contests, and you can look at GSA's website about what those look like. But there are a lot of really great ways across the government to encourage innovation. And so when we work with our partners on budgetary issues specifically, we're often thinking about, okay, this is how much budget we need to maintain operations and maintain the status quo. This is how much we need to drive modernization. And that may grow over time or depending on the situation of that partner. And then this is how much we need to set aside just for innovative activities that engage the agency from the top down and engage industry as well. So in our budgetary discussions, we try to be holistic and really be inclusive of the budget team and the rest of the agency while we're moving forward.
Great. Yeah, it's I operate oftentimes in the O&M world, and it's really difficult to go to the people that are holding those purse strings and explain to them we're doing something kind of innovative. We're developing a new tool, and then have that project fit into their world. So that's really smart that you've recognized that, and that you've built in an instrument to kind of allow for that innovation. So lastly, Elizabeth, do you have anything to add to this second question?
Yeah, I think I'll springboard off of what Sandra and Eric have mentioned in terms of return on investment. You really have to know how to articulate the return that the agency gets on the investment that they're making in your work. And you really need to spell it out for executives, especially the CFO. We're data nerds. We get this stuff backwards and forwards, but you have to put it in layman's terms. And if you're able to save time, prevent spending, reduce rework, automate, you're gaining a real return for your component. If you're able to say that a $1 million investment in a project will yield a $5 million return for the agency, you make it really hard to say no. Sometimes this isn't always easy to do, especially for things like data governance, which can be abstract and whose impact is really long term. So you have to be able to bridge the gap between a qualitative return, which is good, and a quantitative return, dollars, which is better. So if you can communicate what your return is, you're much more likely to get funding. And don't be afraid to go big in your communication on this, even if you are starting small. The work that we're doing has a direct impact on the government being able to achieve whatever mission you're supporting. For me, it's to speed up legal immigration. Another thing that I heard you guys mentioned is partnership, and again, that political capital. You need an operational leader to advocate on your behalf. If an associate director for operations can say, the work that the CDO is doing is critical to my success, you're much more likely to get your funding. And then finally, like how to be ready to catch that funding. Toward the end of the fiscal year, regardless of where your funding comes from, there's usually always money left over. Be ready to take advantage of that. If you have a contract vehicle available to obligate some funding, you're likely to get it. It's just the kind of the nature of the game there.
Right, and having those connections and knowing the right people to kind of get that contract vehicle in front of is also key. All right, so thank you for all of that really very valuable information. I'm going to turn to the third question, but before I do, a little teaser for the audience. We are planning on fielding any questions and have a Q&A. So if you have a burning question and have yet to submit it, please do so now. All right, so third question is kind of piggybacking off of a couple of things that Elizabeth and Eric were talking about, which is that return on investment. And unfortunately, in the public sector, we don't monetize our data. We have to demonstrate how the investment is paying off, what that rate of return is. And I'd like to talk with the panelists and get further ideas about how you do make that demonstration in the public sector. So let's start this question off with Sandra.
So I guess the first thing I would say is you have to know what a meaningful return on investment is when you start. Our IG told us a meaningful return for him was the number of referrals we made to our investigators and auditors and healthcare inspectors. It's also the money. I need to show that I have I have created a cost savings or recovery of some kind that it far exceeds the amount we spent. But I also know that for him, success looks like how much work am I creating for the organization in impactful and meaningful leads. And so once you know that, it helps you know who to talk to, what information to give to which audience. Like Elizabeth said, you need a champion. You need a champion from the very beginning who is going to support you and be there to talk to others about it. But every stakeholder that I talk to, my goal is to turn them into a champion, to find a way to get them so excited about the work that we're doing that they are the ones going out and finding work for me. So for every one of those people, I want to know what their return on investment looks like, what for them makes us successful so that I can report on that as I go forward. And then, you talk about profit motive in the government, and we don't really have that. We do have a duty to save taxpayer money. So one of the things that we have all the data at our fingertips, most of us. So we are the ones in the best place to look at what ways can we use that data and pitch those ideas to people. But also, I'm in the IG community, and so we have the opportunity to work across IGs with other agencies. And a project that for me might be too small to get a prosecutor to take it might be much larger if I look at the data that HHS has or the data that DOD has, and then we combine it together, and now it is a very meaningful, impactful project.
Okay, and turning to Elizabeth now, I know that you talked about this in your prior response, but maybe you can go into a little bit more detail about some of your thoughts.
Sure. like Sandra said, just because profit isn't a motive doesn't mean that money isn't. Time is money, and saving time is just about the most exciting thing that anyone can do in the government. New policies and regulations are constantly demanding us to do more and more without providing any more resources. So data can help us do a lot more with what we already have. Then we can focus our time on what's really important. And there's obviously a million different ways to do that with our data. Analytics can help you identify product lines that aren't successful. It's not going to fix your problem, but it makes it easier to spot so that you can design a solution. It can help you optimize your operations so that people are spending time on things that only people can do. People tend to get afraid with automation and robotics that it's risking their job, but it's really just focusing their time on things that they want to be doing instead of the mundane and redundant. So data can help you evaluate risk and complexity so that you can prioritize those resources. At USCIS, all cases that are interviewed are scheduled for an hour. Period. Some cases are straightforward and can be done in 20 minutes. Others are more complex and take a lot longer. This variability leads to inefficiency in our scheduling. So then time isn't used optimally. So now our field operations have a pilot where they're using data to assess a case's eligibility and complexity to then determine how long to schedule their interview. So this optimizes our most critical resource, our people's time. Another kind of twist on that is with robotic process automation. You can really reduce that redundant manual work. Here at USCIS, we're starting small. Again, the start small mantra that we're talking a lot about. And we're also starting with mission support activities to kind of test the waters. Rather than jumping in feet first into revolutionizing how operations are being done, we're starting with mission support activities like automating recurring reports. So we're running the query, formatting the report, and sending the product. So work that might have taken an analyst an hour or two really takes no more than 5 minutes now. So when we're able to scale into real operations, we'll be able to find a lot more savings there. And again, like Sandra said, data integration. When you can bring disparate data sets together, you can really start to find out some really cool new insights and opportunities for savings.
Awesome. Paul?
I think it's consensus time again. I mean, there's not much more you can add to what Elizabeth and Sandra have said. The government doesn't have a profit motive, but as I think as Sandra said, you have a responsibility to best spend the taxpayers' money. So it could be providing better services. It could be efficiencies. I think Elizabeth mentioned about the efficiencies of doing batch case handling instead of manually doing it one at a time. Yeah. It could be cost savings, cost recovery, fraud detection, and and many instances of fraud detection across the government, whether it's housing benefit, unemployment benefits, etc. All these things are return on your investments. And I actually agree with what I can't remember if it was Elizabeth or Sandra, because you both gave very good remarks. Which one of you mentioned the difficulty in quantifying some of this? When it's, okay, I can detect fraud, there's a dollar value with it. I can increase efficiencies, there's a dollar value with the time that people are spending on very manual work. When it's providing better services to citizens, that's a lot harder to quantify. And I think that goes back to the point that dollar is very easier to quantify. Saving an hour of a citizen's time when they're filling in forms or filing taxes or something like that, it's hard to quantify the value of that, but spread it over 360 million citizens and you've probably got a huge amount of savings on the citizens' time, but hard to quantify. So I have to concur with what's been said.
And so last, Eric, your thoughts.
Yeah, Paul's comments were a great segue into what I want to say. Ultimately, there's the more easily recognizable signs of how we prove a use case's worth or how we prove a program's worth, monetary, cost or savings of time for folks doing the work so that they can focus on the more high level or high reward work that they do. But ultimately, I think one thing we in the data world have a responsibility to do is really respond to users. And respond to users to respond to users rapidly and to take in user feedback. So, for example, if we're setting up a data platform that's sharing data to the agency internally, what data sets are most valuable? How often are people looking at those data sets? What's wrong with those data sets that we need to fix? This is information that we can collect fairly readily. Spotify collects it on which music we're listening to. I think we can collect it on which data sets people are using. I think we can collect it on which tools people are using, what needs to change with those tools, what additional features we can add to those tools. And that's just internally. I think externally, when we're sharing data and data products externally with citizens, we can do the same thing. And I think this is an area that government really has the opportunity to take the lead in. I think we've seen industry, especially media. I'm going to come back to Spotify or any sort of music sharing source again. Is they're collecting information on how we interact with that platform. To enable a better experience next time we come onto that platform. And I think with all products that we build as a government, we need to think about the way our users are interacting with that platform. We need to get information on how they're interacting with that platform so that we can create better products going forward. I think that opportunity exists. I think that opportunity has been proven by a lot of the private sector, and I think that's a spot that we as government can absolutely capitalize. I'll stop banging my drum right now.
Sorry, John, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to challenge Eric on that. I mean, if you think about Facebook and Google, there are all sorts of questions about privacy and data collection. How do you think people will react if it's the federal government?
Oh, I don't think we need to collect that information at the individual level. I think ultimately, we want to understand how to make the products better for people as a whole. I think tailoring products at the individual level, as you mentioned, would have some challenges in that regard. Privacy challenges, which all the data products we build have to go through the privacy office. So we have inherent checks in government that are very important to us and very healthy for us. But I do think ultimately we can get more data on how people are using our products and how people are using our data sets to better inform what we're developing. And I think that opportunity does exist while maintaining a very strict respect for all privacy restrictions that we have.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of further example of what Eric was talking about. There's the Paperwork Reduction Act that we all know and love. And I think at the time that it was developed, you go through the analysis and, the legacy way of doing that, you basically were throwing your finger up in the air and trying to come up with your best guess estimate. But I think that there's enough technology that's out there that would actually assist the government in determining how well our estimates are in filling out those forms. Because, when you have a survey, there's an easy way just to collect that data. And, we respect the privacy. It's just looking at how long somebody, you start the shot clock from when they go into the form until when they press finish. And I think that's actually a really great point, Eric.
On that note, sorry, yeah, John, I was just going to have to jump in there and say that unfortunately we are approaching the end of our time together, and we did have a few questions come through, but I didn't want to interrupt as the conversation was really useful and interesting. So apologies if you did submit a question and we didn't have time to ask it. And what I would say is use it as an excuse to reach out to all of the panelists and to John as the moderator on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to connect with you and respond to your questions on an individual basis as well. So apologies again for that, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So all that really remains then is for me to say thank you. Thank you to John, Elizabeth, Sandra, Eric, and Paul. As I said, I thought the conversation was really engaging, some really interesting points, and I'm glad we had a note of controversy towards the end there as well. But good to see consensus breaking out for the most part. I'm sure the audience will have taken a lot from that. So thank you all.
Great, thank you so much.
Not a problem. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to draw to a close for the day. We will be doing it all again tomorrow. So I do hope you can join us for two very interesting sessions that we've got planned for you. Firstly, we will be hearing more from John, who is going to be presenting rather than moderating. He's going to be presenting about how to foster a data-driven culture within a public sector environment. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing his views on that. And then following that, we will be hearing from Robert Wetzel from the FDA, who's going to be discussing how his journey is ramping up their digital transformation efforts. So I do hope you'll be able to join us tomorrow. Once again, log in at 2 p.m. ET. We'll send you a reminder email, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.